the theology of Islam, sectarianism, what is called in English intellectual history.
Just making claims is not enough. What's the point of making claims when you're making claims on the one hand, but someone can commit an entire genocide on you and basically make your an entire piece of land where Muslims were residing completely inhabitable. Nobody can live in the Gaza Strip anymore, right? So what's the point of making these claims? And when the revolution came and the Iranian revolution came, Imam Khomeini is like, hey, you have to create the Expediency Council of Iran, because the Expediency Council is going to determine whether the application of a ruling has any benefits for the actual community or does it have harms instead.
I'll repeat. Not every ikhtilaf should lead to a khilaf. Ikhtilaf means difference of opinion. Khilaf means difference in the hearts, difference in a community. You can have difference of opinion and still have unity.
For example, Hisham bin Hakam and his school of thought. His school of thought is Yunus bin Abdul Rahman, Fadl bin Shadan, Abbas bin Muhammad al-Warraq, and then the list goes on. Ali bin Yaqdin, Ali ibn Mansur al-Baghdadi, and then so on and so on. Many students. And this school of thought was in Baghdad and Nishapur. Okay, Fadl bin Shadan was in Nishapur, his grave is still there. Then you have the school of Qom, and within the school of Qom, those people who were anti-Hisham bin Hakam, and they were influenced by Hisham bin Salim. They were anti-Hisham bin Hakam. Ahmed bin Muhammad Isa al-Qumi, Sa'ad bin Abdullah al-Ash'ari, Muhammad bin Hassan al-Saffar, Abdullah Ja'far al-Himyari, Ibn al-Walid, the teacher of Shaykh Saduq himself, Ali bin Babawayh al-Qumi, the father of Shaykh Saduq. Right? These guys are actually, they don't think like the school of thought of Hisham bin Hakam. And this is, subhanAllah, I thought that was a very good point. And I will show you something from Nahjul Balagha, where Imam Ali alayhi salam is pretty much not saying the exact same thing, but he is living this tradition. Okay, so in Nahjul Balagha, there are two sets of sermons that are very interesting. Sermon 74. You have certainly known that I am the most rightful of all others for the Khilafah. By Allah, so long as the affairs of the Muslims remain intact and there is no oppression in it, save on myself, I shall keep quiet, seeking reward for it from Allah. This is called excluding the majority from the claim that you made. And this principle basically says that uqala, people who are reasonable, don't talk like this. Okay? You always make an exception of the minority. You always say,
anytime two things or two groups of people or two societies are closer and closer together, automatically the differences between them become more pronounced.
Well, then you gotta treat them like Jahil people as well. You gotta be nice to them. You can't treat them like the kuffar of Makkah, which is a totally different ballgame. The kuffar of Makkah, no, our understanding is that they knew the haqq and they were rejecting it. That's why they were called kuffar, kafir. So that's what his point is. And that's really, honestly, if you actually acknowledge this idea, your life is going to be so calm and tranquil.
Even if they're important at some places and times, right here and now, it becomes trivial. So my 7th point, context. Look at the world around you.
100% it's a later phenomenon. 100 years later, 150 years later, 200 years later. And Islam is not defined by what happened 2 centuries after the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Islam is defined by the seerah of the Holy Prophet and the practice of the A'imma. Because, and by the way, practice of the A'imma, fair enough, we have some narrations that say that, but these are limited and time-bound references to individuals and categories of people. This is not your identity at the end of the day. Your identity should be Muslim. You're a mu'min. You want to take a word that emerged in 2nd century and you want to make that your identity, then something's wrong with you. Something is seriously wrong with you. You haven't even understood the purpose of religion. You need to go back and hit the basic kalam books at that point.
And in order to solve those problems, sometimes respected scholars 5,000 miles away are not the best source of answers for our modern problems. I speak as somebody who respects those scholars because I've studied with them. They've written tazkiyas for me.
And anytime a new phenomenon comes, generally speaking, the fuqaha will study it and analyze it. And so let's say at a certain time, I don't know, the radio was invented, or the TV was invented, or some, I don't know, cars were invented. So when this new issue came, the fuqaha they analyzed it, they discussed it, and they wrote books on it. And some in the beginning, some of them said radio, you cannot listen to it. Some of them said no, you can, but don't listen to the Quran on it because it's disrespectful. And then later they changed. So they have to study the phenomenon. They have to have some experience with it.
So for example, when it comes to who's going to lead the salah in the masjid, we make a narrow circle, the smallest circle. Who's going to teach Islamic studies to the kids in our Islamic school? We don't want somebody from another firqa. We don't. Who's going to teach Islamic studies? We narrow the circle. Somebody who has similar understandings, generic Sunni Islam needs to be there. It's only the teenagers who make a fuss and release YouTube videos that actually understand this. Guilt by association is not an Islamic concept. This is a figment in the minds of the fanatical youth. It is not.
Okay, so some interesting points here. He's talking about circles of cooperation or concentric circles. I think it was a fair point, right? So if you have like salat and your Sunday school, madrasa, well, yeah, salat, you want to have someone from your own sect to be leading that salat. Or in a madrasa, Sunday school, where you're teaching literally, the usuluddin and the basic understanding of, or basic interpretation of your religion, your sect, well, then obviously you're going to need someone from your own sect. But for a school, that's very interesting because it depends how you define the school. So it's more from the perspective of uzr, an excuse on the Day of Judgment. You will have an excuse on the Day of Judgment, basically. Okay, as long as you're not negligent and a muqassir and all of that. And secondly, from a Shi'i perspective in particular, right? And maybe Shaykh Yasir Qadhi is not familiar with this discourse because it's very unique to Imami Shi'ism. And that is the discourse that develops post-ghaiba, post-occultation of Imam al-Mahdi. And that is the idea that the Asr al-Ghaiba,